Hey, just today I want to see one game. This game is played between Brian, Robert, and Bobby Fischer. This game was played in the third Rosen World Trophy in 1956. This is the game of the century. Sounds bit amazing, isn't it? Should sound amazing because today we are going to see a magnificent masterpiece. So let's begin the game. The game started well. What opening should the game start with? The game started with E4, our favorite. Nah, man, not too many games with E4. Knight F3 was played. Knight F6, C4, G6, Knight C3, Bishop G7. This opening often transposes to Benko-Benoni-Grunfeld structures. I mean Benko-Benoni-Grunfeld openings. So here was played D4 and this got the seal of the sword. And here was played, yes sir, it was played D5. And now was played short castle, bishop f4, and now d5. Now what is played? Okay, now was played what was played? Last movement. Okay, here was played queen to b3, attacking the d5 pawn and the b7 pawn at the same time. So d into c4, taking the pawn, queen into c4, and now was played c6. Looks like this pawn is taking the place of the knight, but it's not as you think, because after c6 this knight is doing well on its will do well when it's played knight d7 and then knight b6. That is the idea. So it's okay to play like c6. Now what should we play? This opening is not so concrete yet. You need to know some information because it's the English opening, Anglo-Indian defense. Anglo-Indian defense, okay, might be an opening. Now what? This is the question of the century. No, question of the century. What should we play here? So there are kind of, but in the game was played e4, knight bd7, and now, yes sir, you can continue. Rook d1, knight b6, queen c5, and now bishop to g4, pinning the knight, and then bishop to g5. And now what should you play? Pause d v d. Yo, and think. think what should you play? Okay, so now what should you play? Bishop g5. This is a moment of thinking. Now thing is that opponent has captured over the center, and here there is a subdue of some relevance. So what should you play? Knight to a4. A brilliant move was played. My god, brilliant. Knight to a4. What a move. Classy. By the way, Fisher is 13 years old in this game only. So queen to a3 was played. If knight into a4 comes, then knight into e4. And now what should you play? This question of the decade. What should you play here? Question of the decade. So here it was played queen. Actually, this is not the real game. This is just a variation. So queen c1. If you here play queen c2, then bishop into f3, destroying the defender. G into f3, knight into g5. Queen c1. Now there's queen e5 check, and all of a sudden you lose a piece. If you go back with the bishop, then I take your knight and I am a pawn up, plus 2 bishop advantage. And if you play knight to c3, then I can do one smart thing. First take on f3, g into f3, and then take on g5 with a pawn up, and opponent's king side position is completely crushed. Pawn structure is crushed. So that would be way better for me. That's why is played after queen a3 was played. Yes, continue. Knight into c3, b into c3. And now what should you play? Pause the video and think. Here there are many options, but the one truly good is knight into e4. Nice one if you found this. I think good move. Not brilliant, because one can see after bishop into e7, queen b6, even when not seeing the concrete variations, one can see that this position is just busted. If you take on e7, if you take bishop into f8, then just bishop into f8, and now this is really bad. Queen b3, and now knight into c3, tactical shot. Good move. Tactical shot. Okay. This deserves to be good move. So queen into b6. If you play into b6, then I attack your rook, and if you play something like rook a1, I just play bishop b4, and it is just game over. Knight into c3, b into c3, knight into e4, bishop into e7, queen b6, bishop into f8, bishop into f8. This is not the thing that happened in the game. In the game, bishop c4 was played. Now what should you play? Hit the pause the video and think button now. Okay, that is kind of now this is time for thinking. What should you play here? This is a amusing position. That's why I pause the video and think. That's why I'm saying you to do this. Okay, so here in this quite complicated position, the only move winning I mean, two moves are winning. Rook f8 is good option, but one thing of Fisher is very important. He always goes for the best move, not even good option. In whole the game, he goes for good moves, but they are complicated. Many people refrain from complications, but that's the nature of chess, my friend. You, if you fear complications and calculations, then that's bad. That's really bad. Because in chess complications and calculations occur all the time. But Fisher did not fear this. He always went for complications and always saw his way through with good. Now was played knight into c3, another tactical shot. That's three already. Now after knight into c3, here thing is that if you take on c3, then I play rook f e8, and now this bishop is under huge trouble. You don't wanna get in this position. Yeah, rook a e8 by the Indian short castle. Rook into e7, and just now you are a pawn up with two bishop advantage. What not to fear, two bishop advantage again. So that's why this is good for us. So after knight into c3, bishop into f8. If you play bishop into f8, then I play bishop into f8. Queen into c3 is bishop b4. So that's why bishop into actually queen c3 is main line. The queen is just like almost trapped. And if you play queen c1, then first I take here. If you take, then I take here. Then you should short castle. You can't even take because there's queen b4 check, and if you take with the king, then there's queen d4 check. So summarization, very bad position if you take on f8. So bishop c5 is only move. Now after bishop to c5, what should you play? Okay, now you have a choice. Either to play safe with knight to b5 and go for like queen e3, queen a5, which is good option. But Bobby Fischer, as you know, goes for rook f to e8 check, good move. King to f1. Now why good move is rook f to e8? Because he is committing his decision. Now either you lose the c3 knight or lose the game. Because see here, if you now play knight to b5, it doesn't work. Because bishop into f7 check, king into f7, queen b3 check, and your queen is hanging. Bishop e6, knight g5 check, king f6, knight into e6, and white has huge problems. That's why rook f e8 is good move. King to f1, knight to b5. Now okay. What should you play? So after king f1 was played bishop to e6. It's a super extraordinary result if you found this. This move was the punchline of the game of the century. What an immortal queen sacrifice. Now let's start with the calculations. Okay. In the game was played bishop into b6. Now if you play queen into c3, there's queen into c5, d into c5, bishop into c3, bishop into e6, rook into e6, and we are winning. If you play bishop into e6, then pause the video and think. There's queen b5 check, king g1, and now we take on knight e2. Pause and think. Knight e2 check, king f1, knight g3 check, king g1, queen f1 check, good move. Rook into f1 and knight e2 is mate. Queen f1, beautiful shot. So that's why we are winning. Now these are over, so let's go to the main line. Bishop into b6. Bishop into e2 check, king through g1, and now it's the point of the line. Now thing is that we can't take on b6 because queen into c3 is bad for us. Yeah, so first knight e2 check. Yeah, because this d4 pawn obstructs. First we remove the d4 pawn. So f1 knight into d4 check, king g1, and now you making use of windmill. Knight e2 check, king f1, knight c3 check, king g1, and now before knight into d1, a into b6, and white cannot protect the d1. Rook queen b4, hoping to get a piece for the rook at least, but now rook to a4, just crushing. Queen into b6 and knight into d1. Oh my god. Knight into d1, we have a rook and two pieces and a pawn for a queen. So h3 and we win one more pawn, rook into a2. King h2, we win one more pawn, knight into f2. It's just too much material now. Rook e1 force, rook into e1. Queen d8 check force, knight into e1, bishop e5 check. And this is very lost. That's why first queen d8 check, bishop to f8, knight into e1. Bishop to d5 with threat of minus 76.6. Oh my god, with threat of king to g7. So now knight f3, knight to e4, threatening bishop to d6. Now after knight f3, knight e4, thing is that here king g7 is the threat, releasing the bishop, and then bishop d6 is just lost. So after knight f3, knight e4, this position is just very bad for white. So queen b8, attacking the b7 pawn, b5. Now after b5, we push the b pawn until the square, and also this king is very weak. So h4 was played, threatening h5, but Fischer played h5, just no counterplay to the opponent. Knight to e5, threatening knight to d7, taking the bishop. But now just king g7, and threat is bishop d6, winning the knight. That's why it was played. King to g1, escaping the bishop's race, but it's just too late now. Now was played bishop c5 check, king to f1, knight g3 check, king to e1, bishop b4 check, king to d1, the king is caught in a mating net, bishop to b3 check, king to c1, knight to e2 check, king to b1, knight c3 check, king c1, rook c2 check mate, and a very nice Vukovic mate. Another mate was bishop to a3 mate. A very beautiful and instructive game by Fischer. Let's see what we learn. First thing that we learn is that chess is sometimes a very concrete game, and sometimes better than the good options are the complicated ones. So complications are a part of the game, and when you see a complicated line which is better than the line, you should generally choose it. So here the summary of the game. It all started from here. This queen c5 was a risky decision, queen b3 was a safer one. Now knight a4, this tactical shot, and if knight into a4, knight into e4, and very strong play in the center. So queen a3, knight into c3, b into c3, knight into e4, threatening knight into bishop into f3, knight into g5, so bishop into e7. But now queen to b6, and and the counterplay is suddenly very strong. Bishop to c4, but now knight into c3, bishop to c5, rook f8, king f1, bishop e6. This bishop e6 move is one of the greatest moves ever played by Fischer, and is one of the most beautiful moves, because here after bishop into c4 we launch a mill, and instead of saving our queen, he plays bishop to e6, and now the windmill is just too strong for the opponent to handle. And after that, it was just a matter of time for the conversion. Let's go to today's daily puzzle. This puzzle is composed by Rink, very famous composer. Pause the video and think what will you do. Not an easy puzzle. Now was played knight to h4 check. Good move. Now white's idea is that if you play a6, mistake, then after a3, a7, a2, 8 is equal to queen, there is a1 is equal to queen, and after queen into a1, knight c2 check, king to f1, knight into a1. Black is slightly better in this endgame, so this is mistake. But knight h4 check, key of this move is that if you now play king into g3, if you play king e3, we'll jump to that later. If king into g3, then the main purpose of this puzzle is to, main purpose of this knight h4 is to play knight to f5 check, distracting the knight from playing that knight c2 motif and forking the king and queen. That's why this works. Knight into f5, if you play king somewhere, knight into d4, a3, I just play knight b3, and then a6, a7, 8 is equal to queen. So this is the point of it. And after knight into f5 was played a6, a3, a7, a2, and 8 is equal to queen. 8 is equal to queen is the idea. So this, okay, now check, and then takes, and this was the main line. If king to e3, then same motif applies here. Just knight to f5 check. Here knight into f5. If king d3, then knight into d4. a3, then knight, then a6 is also winning, a2, and then knight b3. So this is a good one. King c3, then knight king c3, a7, king into b3, 8 is equal to queen. If king b2, then queen b8 check, king to c3, queen e5 check, king c4, and then queen a1, or just queen e6 check, and then queen into a2 is winning. And if knight into f5, after knight f5 check, then a6, a3, a7, a2, 8 is equal to queen, a1 is equal to queen check, and queen into a1 is winning. So this was the daily puzzle. Good job if you found all the right moves. So this was the video. I hope you like this video and subscribe for new videos every day. Thank you.